I met today's guest, Brianna Lafferty, at the IANDS conference. IANDS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Brianna shared some details of her near-death experience with me, and I knew I had to have her come on. It was so interesting. Bit more about Brianna. She is an award-winning author, international speaker, and a passionate death doula. After a lifetime of chronic illness, a near-death experience, and learning how to do what was thought to be impossible, which was healing herself, she is now passionate about helping others achieve the same. Whether it's planning for end-of-life matters, coping with grief, or gaining clarity about the spiritual world and the magic that it holds, Brianna has the life experience to assist. And before you listen to this episode, I do need to give a few content warnings. Of course, we talk about death, as we always do discuss in this podcast, but we also talk about some other dark things, such as violence, sexual abuse, and assault, including sexual assault of children. While that's touched upon very briefly, it is still mentioned, so I want to give you a heads up. Also, two other things. There is some static that I am not able to edit out when Brianna speaks at some points, but it's really not too bad. I edited as best as I could, and it doesn't take away from the story. You should still be able to hear everything, and it's just at certain points in the episode. Adding to that, it was just when Brianna spoke, and once again, she's a near-death experiencer. I normally would edit out when there are technical glitches, but we couldn't use Zencastr, where I normally record my episodes, once again, as this seems to happen frequently, only when I have near-death experiencers on. And we had a few glitches while we were recording on Zoom, which we had to move to because Zencastr wasn't working. There are studies. I'm actually going to link to a specific study in the show notes that talks about how near-death experiencers have all these weird interactions with electronics. Electronics do not work normally around them, which is so evidential and so weird, and something they discuss at the IANDS conference, something researchers are studying, something I have been noticing since 100% of the technical problems I've had have only been with near-death experiencers, and I was warned in advance that that could be an issue. I want to give all of you also a few updates and kind of some housekeeping notes before we get into the episode. First of all, you may have noticed I haven't been including the question of the week. I'm pausing that for now and looking into a little bit of restructuring of the podcast that's coming soon. It'll still be published weekly, nothing major, but I'm going to be offering some Patreon options, and they're going to offer some more interaction. I haven't sorted out the details yet, but I'm close and they should be up in a few weeks. If you already did submit a question, I will get to it and do a few final question of the weeks. And I also hope that won't stop any of you from still reaching out. I always do want to hear from you. And speaking of that, if you've messaged me and haven't heard from me, I'm so sorry. I will get to all my emails really soon. I have just been so busy. I have another job aside from What the Fuck in the zero waste space, and it takes a lot of time. It was just Tech Week where we were working round the clock. And on another note, which I have mentioned before, something else that has kept me really busy is I have been finishing up the final details of my audiobook for book 1 and all the final edits on book 2. And also, editing videos takes a lot more time than just editing audio. So I don't want any of you to think it's because I'm blowing you off. I'm working really hard to make sure all of you get the best content. and that I'm incorporating your feedback, such as making videos, which I know a lot of you wanted. I will let you know when book 2 is available for pre-order and when the audiobook for book 1 is ready. It's really, really soon, as in a few more weeks. So those are the updates. And with that, here's today's guest, Brianna. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey-skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened? Okay, I love your background. That's amazing.
Thank you. Well, and that's one perk of Zoom is I get my channel, which is very close to what I saw in my NDE. So,
hi. So I am speaking now with Brianna Lafferty, who I met at IANDS conference, and her NDE was just so fascinating when she generously shared it with everyone there. So let's start a little bit, because I know your history ties into this experience a bit. And I'm just actually going to interrupt one thing and say if you're listening to this only on audio, I will put a little mini video in Instagram, and you can also go to our YouTube, because you have to see Brianna's background. And she said in a lot of ways that sums up her NDE, which we'll talk about more as we go into it. But do not miss out. At least look at the little mini video on Instagram if you don't want to go watch the full video on YouTube. So now back to what I was going to ask. So I know you basically had a lifetime of health struggles leading up to your NDE. Would you mind sharing a bit about what your life was like?
yeah, absolutely. So at age 10, I started developing really odd, unusual symptoms. I would have weird involuntary muscle movements at first. It grew into a lot of muscle rigidity in my forearms and my calves. And I would wrap my arms and legs in ace bandages to go to school. Just kind of weird symptoms started when I was 10. And by the time I was 14 or 15, I had immense pain from not only the muscle rigidity, but I also developed nerve pain that was just everywhere. And so the muscle rigidity I'll kind of describe as, if you ever had a Charlie horse in the middle of the night, it's like that, but in my forearms and calves, that could last anywhere from 30 seconds to weeks. So it would just be relentless. And it also developed in my back as well. So I was undiagnosed for 8 years until I was 18. Finally got a diagnosis. And at that point, we tried all the medication leading up to that, as well as once I got a diagnosis. And it is a extremely rare neurological disorder called myoclonus dystonia. And I've just researched how many people are known to have it, and it's still less than 1 in a million as of August. So didn't really know what to do, and I was kind of left to my own devices, my own treatment, whatever, because the doctors were like, we don't know how to help anymore. So that went on for another 8 years until 2017, when I had my near-death experience.
I'm so sorry you went through that in your childhood. That must have been so I don't know the words. It must have made for a very hard. It takes a special strength, I would think, to go through something like that. And I guess you don't really have a choice, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I used to love to draw, but the condition also brought upon tremors in my late high school years. And so
Mhm.
I could no longer draw. So I was like, my one thing. And so I had to deviate. So it was just a lifetime of learning how to adapt and overcome and learn new things, and tried my best to try to enjoy this new, ever changing life.
Um, well, so now let's get into tell us what happened with your NDE. How did that come about?
Yeah. So, we tried everything to try to cure this, or cure or treat, manage this disorder. We tried Eastern medicine, Western medicine, Chinese herbs, Reiki, hypnosis, chiropractor, meditation, acupuncture. Gosh, I mean, you name it, we try it. So in my mid 20s, 2017, I was really, really struggling. And my mom had heard that, sometimes people get attached with these entities and they cause havoc on the human body. And they cause all sorts of crazy disorders. Well, myoclonus dystonia, we thought was a pretty crazy disorder. And, hardly anyone had seen it. It's very, very taboo. My grandma said it looked like I was fighting something off because of all the involuntary muscle movements I would, twitch and hit stuff. I'd hit myself, hit walls, throw stuff. And so after my mom read, my mom was still is an avid researcher. She would never stop. She wouldn't stop until she found something. She's going to take care of her baby. So we decided to try these spirit release therapy. Another reason we thought maybe it was a good idea and maybe that was the problem was I saw and experienced several crazy paranormal activities and metaphysical things in my childhood as well. I saw a ghost and I saw this really creepy entity. It was a black shadow that had a top hat and a cape that crossed the back wall of our basement a few times. Unbeknownst to me, my sister and her friends also saw it. I saw it. My friends saw it from our church. And it wasn't until I released my book that I did some more research into this guy. And it's a well known dark entity that shows up to children in basements across the world. So we thought, well, let's give it a shot. So she warned us that you could get pretty sick with the spirit release therapy. I'm not sure exactly how it works. I know hypnotists do it, and there's special people who are trained in spirit release. And she's like, yeah, you can get a little sick, just, heads up. Well, I got really sick. On top of my already sick illness, my tired, exhausted body, I started becoming very ill with flu-like symptoms. Couldn't keep down food, water, basically married to the toilet on both ends. Just became very, very, very ill throughout this process. And the entities that I had known from a young child had grown very aggravated. They apparently were attached to me and they were not happy to leave. And so they became pretty violent psychologically and physically, as well as I'm just getting really sick. So after a few weeks of this, my mom and I were just praying constantly, and I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. So at 2 a.m. on April 17th, I knew my mom needed to get some sleep. So the only way I knew she would do that is if I told her I was going to try to get some sleep. I knew that wasn't possible. So I hung up the phone with her and I basically cried out. At this point, I didn't know. I was raised Christian and I didn't know what I believed in. The God I prayed to and begged to take away the myoclonus dystonia had never answered me. But I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I was exhausted and I used all my reserves. So I cried out, and to the only God I knew of, just if there's this thing out there that's amazing, that creator, it's in your hands. I can't do this anymore. I surrendered everything. I said, it's up to you. I can't do this. So I said that with my heart, my soul, my body, everything. Instantly, I felt those entities ripped away, and just the sense of calmness and peace for the first time ever. And I felt tapping on my palms and my feet. And after that, I heard this very loud, booming voice. Are you ready? I don't know where the voice came from. And it was kind of inside my head, other than like out of it. And I just knew that something had answered my prayer or my call. And yeah, I was going to be ready. Yeah, I'm ready. What am I ready for? I don't care. You answered. It's in your hands. I'm ready. I said yes. And I felt 3 hard pounds on my chest. And that's when my heart stopped and I left my body. Then I enter this amazing space. It's this black velvety love. It's not nothing. It's more like everything. Like if all the energy in the world, the universe was in this space, it kind of just vibrated through me. And I realized I was with the creator. I was with the thing that answered my call, this immense love. It was amazing. And I kind of asked, am I dead? I don't know why I even thought to ask that, but it was just such a knowing. And these 3 months kind of floated by, giving me a shit-eating grin, like, oh, if you only knew. After that, I was going through this beautiful tunnel. It was blue, like the most brilliant blue, like a blue that is beyond words and just bright. And it had a little bit of white and ones and zeros. And I'm going through it at supersonic speed. And while I'm going through it, I see these ones and zeros all around me. And I feel like I'm being downloaded with information, amazing information. I then end up in this white, I call it a room, but it's just a space. There's no walls or doors or ceilings or floors. And there's this giant pile of black numbers in front of me, and this presence behind me that I know to be on the level, depending on your religion, the level of Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, depending on your religion. I didn't identify, one person or entity that was behind me. I never saw his face, but I could feel it. And I just pick up the numbers. No wonder you love creating. And I throw them up in the air and realize that everything's created with math. And it was so exciting. I was like a little kid. And then I end up in another space. And there's beings everywhere. And I say beings because I can't tell you if they had ever had human lives or where they came from or who they were. I just knew they were either alive or not alive beings. They were there, and everyone was
conscious, I guess, instead of alive.
Yeah,
Is what you mean. Conscious.
Consciousnesses. And everyone is just flowing together so beautifully and sliding down trees that are covered in snow. And I'm like, I don't think I like snow. Instantly, it turns into lush green. And I'm like, oh, that looks like fun. Instantly, I'm sliding down the trees like Tarzan and realize that, oh my gosh, if I don't like snow and it turned to green, but they like snow and they're sliding down, maybe it's snow for them while it's green for me. Like we're living these different experiences all together. I thought that was so cool. And then there was a time where I was a robot and I tried to fly and I was not very good. I cut my arm, like my arm got cut off from a pole and it regrew with numbers. I saw the binary code just like pull it back together. Ended up dancing with these other beings, and it was like we choreographed this for years. I spoke with this old man what seemed like overnight, and I still don't know what we spoke about, but I know it'll come to me one day. After this space, I was a robot, I was a doll, I was a snowman, which is ironic for not liking snow. It's just everything, all our thoughts, like as soon as you had a thought, it would happen. And everyone just knew and just grooved. And at one point, I melted as a snowman. And I was like, I wonder if they'll put me back together. Sure enough, everyone instantly put me back together. Leaving that space, there was a barbed wire fence where, barbed wire here, you can see through. You can see what's on the other side. You can see if it's a farm or a forest or whatever. There, it was all blurry. I couldn't see anything past the fence. And a bunch of these beings were going through an opening in the fence across the bridge. And I just knew I couldn't go there. I didn't know why or what was really beyond there. I just knew I couldn't go. So the last part of this, I ended up in another place with 7 magnificent beings. Once again, I couldn't see, but I knew they're very, very important and powerful. And they're behind me, and they unrolled a scroll in front of me with beautiful golden script. I'm pretty sure it had like some huge secrets of the universe, but my ego came back and said, "Oh, you're showing this to a human." Instantly, the scroll scrolled back up, and I was back in my body. And it's one thing to feel your heart stop, but it is a whole nother to feel it start again.
Oh, okay. So I'm just going to tell our listeners, I always send our guests a few questions in advance and say, I might have like a couple of questions based off of your answer. Like our whole conversation, I just have about 30 different questions now.
Perfect.
I'm so interested in this. Okay. So I want to just back up and ask, first of all, you said that you were given information. What was the information you were given?
So are you talking about during the tunnel download?
Yeah, you just said you were given a lot of information. So that I want to know so badly what.
So I was unaware of what information was downloaded. I just knew it would come to me when I needed it. So I will start by saying, after this experience, I didn't have any symptoms for almost 2 years of myoclonus dystonia.
And is that medically possible in general? Would a doctor say that's medically possible?
Not really. Myoclonus dystonia doesn't go into remission. That's just not a thing, especially a progressive one. Completely away. We thought I was cured.
Was it instant? Did it instantly go away?
Yeah, instantly. It didn't fade away. It instantly was gone. So we thought I had been cured, and it was this amazing, miraculous thing. Like I didn't know anything about near-death experiences. So I'm telling my mom what had happened when I hung up the phone, and she has heard of near-death experiences, and she's like, oh my God, she died. So I knew hardly any. I knew what the term was, and that was it. But she had heard that people get cured of miraculous things with near-death experiences. So we kind of had our hopes that I was cured. Well, it came back to, within that 2-year window, and with a vengeance, because it's progressive. The medical industry still doesn't say it's progressive, and yet every single person I know now with myoclonus dystonia is progressive. So I finally got deep brain stimulation surgery for it. It was phenomenal. It was fantastic. And what deep brain stimulation does is I've got a battery in my chest and a little computer, and it goes up a wire, and I've got 2 implants into the deep part of my brain, and it sends out like constant electricity. And mine was super, super successful, but I could tell within a change, I was at 2.6 amps about, and there's a ton that goes into it. The frequency, the pulse width, how many of the 4 prongs are on, and how far it goes, all that stuff. But I could tell within 0.1 of an amp a difference in my body, mentally, whatever. So that's where the information from my tunnel comes in, at least the part of it. I went to a meditation retreat this summer, and on
Wait, this current summer.
Yes,
So let me back up. So after your NDE, you were great for 2 years. Then this came back with a vengeance until you got through traditional medicine, you got the surgery and the implant that you just described. And then how many years later was it that you went to this meditation this summer that you're about to tell us?
Not even two. So, and we had wanted the deep brain stimulation surgery since I was 18 because we had known about it, but we couldn't find a doctor who was willing to put an 18-year-old through experimental brain surgery.
Right. Understandable. Wait, what year was your NDE? Sorry, I'm just trying.
2017.
17. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
so
was
recent.
Yeah. 6.5 years ago.
Okay.
So then almost 2 years with no symptoms, then another 2 years of hellacious symptoms, and then a year and a half later, I go to this meditation retreat.
Okay.
Also, I'm really bad with timelines, so please forgive me.
I'm terrible. I think it comes down. I forgot how old I was, which Joe Peretta, if you're listening to this, you will never let me live that down. And part of it is I think I can't process how long my dad's been gone. So I'll be like, oh, it was like 3 years ago, but it was 8 years. So like that won't go into my brain. So if someone's like, oh, when was this? I'll be like, oh, 3-4 years ago. And then I'll realize, no, it was like 7, 8. Just, it's improcessable that he was gone that long. So that's where I am with time. But we're going to also talk about time. I mean, there's a lot of things we're going to be talking about after your story. So I just wanted to put that little aside in because I think a lot of listeners who are coming here based on grief understand this. So, okay. So go on. Sorry.
So anyways, I go to this meditation retreat, and on the second day, I have an amazing meditation. My brain and heart go into coherence. It's wonderful. And part of my tunnel comes back to me, and it starts circulating in my heart and my brain. And I realize it's the code I need to rewire my brain. So I am like so excited. I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh. Is this what it was to heal myself? So the next day was July 4th. I was too scared to turn it off before going to bed because, I didn't want a hellacious night of symptoms I could turn it off. Yeah.
You mean you turn off the device?
Yeah, I could turn off the device, and I just knew I was healed, and but I was too nervous that night to do it.
Had you ever turned it off before? Is this something you do? Okay, so it's not something you're supposed to do like every few hours or every day. No, you're not supposed to turn it off.
Especially with myoclonus dystonia. So some dystonias, people turn it off for sleep and, it's symptom relief during the day. But with myoclonus dystonia, it's the longer you have it on, the better it helps create the new pathways you need in your brain. And so you're not really supposed to turn it off with myoclonus dystonia. And, I played with the up, turning it up and turning it down a little bit, tweaking settings and stuff just for more relief. Which is why I know, and my programmer, could tweak it massively, and I could get side effects like my face would freeze, or I couldn't walk, or I'd start twitching a lot, or, all my symptoms would be gone. Or symptoms would be gone from part of my body, but really bad over here. I mean, it's just the brain is a crazy thing. And seeing my programmer, my doctor, play with the it looks like a tablet, and he's just like, it looks like he's just this most beautiful video game player. I don't know, and playing with my brain. So anyways, 4th of July at 10:02. I decided to turn it off because I could turn it back on, okay, if this goes south, I can turn it back on. Not a big deal. Okay. So I turn it off. I should immediately feel symptoms. I don't. But then it's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, a few hours later, the next day, and I'm coming up on 4 months and still no more symptoms than when I had it on. And so the tunnel definitely came to me and rewired my brain. I mean, how do you describe that? It's so amazing and fun and exciting and crazy.
Wow. So, wow, I have like 80 questions spinning in my head at the exact same time. So let me pick one. I'm just going to ask a few like little things I'd like you to clarify, and then we'll move further. So first of all, you said you downloaded the information, but it wasn't clear, specific information like this is the meaning of life.
Correct.
This
Yeah.
is the answer to string theory. It was more, you sensed it was information going in,
Yes.
but it wasn't broken down specifically.
Mhm.
And then you realized the information was the ones and zeros, which are code for your brain, and it wasn't wired correctly. So it was the proper code, just like a computer would re-download proper code to fix it, for example. It was that kind of thing.
100%. And I believe there was more information that was downloaded in there. That just happened to be part of it that, showed up, revealed itself. But yes, I don't recall what that information is. It was just like a download. So if you go to download a program, you don't see all the code behind it. You just see downloading. So it's like that. And then when you need that program, you can go in and look and search for it. So I feel like that's what happened in that instance.
That's insane. Wow. And so I just want to ask you to clarify the blue. So you said it was like blue, but it's not a type of blue we can see or you've ever seen in this dimension in a body with these eyes, correct?
Correct. Yeah. It was this most magnificent, bright, just amazing blue. But yeah, and I searched for years trying to find that blue here. And I'm like, okay, it just doesn't exist here. That's fine. I'll let it go.
Right? I mean, our eyes can only see a certain portion on the color spectrum. So if people are like, wow, that sounds really out there, it really isn't. We can't see infrared. We can't see ultraviolet. Right. And I'm sure it just goes and expands beyond that our body, our eyes filter. Mm-hmm. And how long was your NDE by our time?
So my heart had only stopped for 8 minutes here. However, I thought it had been, when I came back and realized I was back in this body, I thought it had been months. And I was positive my family disregarded my wishes to be cremated. I was going to open my eyes and have to figure out how to crawl my way out of a coffin, out of the ground. I mean, I was actually terrified. I was like, oh my God, like I've been gone for so long. Like what happened to, like, what am I going to open my eyes to? And then I realized it had only been 8 minutes, and that was the trip.
And your heart had been stopped that entire time.
Yeah.
How do you know it was stopped if you weren't being monitored by a doctor?
So that is a great question, one I struggled with for a little while. But just the fact that I felt it start again was a huge, huge thing to me. Like, it's a really, really weird feeling to feel your heart just start up again. Like if you inhibit a body and there's no heartbeat and then suddenly there's a heartbeat, I just don't know how to describe that other than it's a knowing and a feeling. And, I guess I assume because I was not part of my body and I felt it stop and I felt it start when I came back. So I just, some assumptions go into it, but I also have this deep knowing.
Yeah. And it was 8 minutes because you saw the time before you left and you looked at your phone or if you have a clock. Okay.
Yeah. I said goodnight to my mom at a certain time. And then I called out, and I think that happened very, very quickly. Like all that, like from hanging up to just giving up, hanging up to giving up. Was relatively quick. And then when I finally opened my eyes, which I don't think took too long because I realized I wasn't going back to the place I was. I tried slowing my breathing and relaxing. I'm like, if I just relax enough, I can leave again. I don't have to be here or whatever. I just want to go back. And when I realized that didn't work, I opened my eyes just to see what I was dealing with. And I looked at the time, my phone, and it had only been 8 minutes. And that was really crazy.
And so you weren't given the choice to come back. A being didn't, you just were, and no one just talked about it with you the way some NDEs, you were just suddenly back in your body with a feeling of your heart restarting that you can't really put into words.
Yes.
Correct.
And I am positive if I was given the choice, I wouldn't have made the choice to come back. I had it was really, really hard for basically my whole life. I didn't sleep as a child either. And I screamed for 9 months when I first got here. And, there wasn't anything to come back to for me. So I wouldn't have chosen to come back, which is probably why I didn't get the option.
Right. I think most people dealing with the medical issues you were dealing with would not have chosen to come back.
Yeah, and I didn't have kids, and my family had already, been through hell too with this medical condition. And I tried taking my own life even before a couple times. And so I'm like, they'll be fine. So oh, a lot of people come back because their kids, or they're going to see their kids, or their kids need them. I didn't have any of that. So I was forced to come back, which, retrospect and hindsight, I know why, but then I wasn't too happy about it. And I actually, I tried to get back there through suicide again, and that also didn't work. So when I realized suicide didn't work before, I couldn't stay dead in my NDE, and I couldn't get back there through suicide again, I decided, all right, well, I guess we'll figure out how to make this life work. I must be here for a reason.
If you want me to stop with any of this line of questioning, I'll stop at any point or edit any of this. But regarding attempting suicide after your NDE, had you known your body was healed or re-downloaded, whatever the word is, had you known at that point your disease was not a part of your body anymore? Or I don't know how to word it properly, because I know none of that.
I know what you're
right way. So I'm trying to be very respectful, but while at the same time,
I get what you're saying. Did I know that I didn't have symptoms? So
didn't have symptoms. Yes.
I guess I was so confused and in so much turmoil, and so much new stuff had happened during this after NDE period. So I came back just so freaked out of even walls, and it felt like I was stuffed in a sausage casing, and I could hear plants, and I could hear people's thoughts, and I could feel medical things. So if I drove past an accident, I could feel where they were hurt in the car accident. And it was so overwhelming. I don't think I had the capacity to realize that I didn't have symptoms. It wasn't until the meditation retreat that I really thought about how long my symptoms had been gone for. I think I finally realized it after the suicide attempt, maybe a few months later, but I had such a hard time reintegrating with this life in general that I just didn't have the capacity to even realize I wasn't having symptoms, if that makes sense.
Somewhat. Yeah, I think as all NDE or experiencers say, you can only explain something to an extent. None of us can fully understand, but that seems to be a consistency among everyone who's had an NDE. You don't even feel connected to your body in a certain way. You feel trapped in it, disoriented, which I guess, while that sounds really, really trying and difficult, it can give all of us hope that our loved ones and ourselves one day have something to really look forward to, not just obliteration, which, was always my life terror and made, So you said you could hear people's thoughts. Did you get any verification of that? Like, find out it was true?
I mean, my mom and my sister, they were the only people I really told at that time, and they would confirm it. And that was just, it was a lot, and I tried really hard to shut that down, and eventually it did go away. But I mean, there's no confirmation on, feeling the plant's feelings. That one's still kind of inevitable. Like I could feel when a plant was sad. Like, I don't know. It was very weird. So all of this happened right, in the year after my NDE.
Do you think plants have emotions and thoughts?
I do now. I do now. I didn't.
What would it be to be a plant? Like, I know this is so speculative and it takes everyone trusting a bit, but this is worth hearing because this isn't something you get to hear from most people. So if you could best explain it, and everyone, go with it.
It's interesting because I my great grandmother had a few NDEs, and she had a huge green thumb. And, all this information came through my mom. I never knew my great grandma, but I guess she would talk to her plants. And when I came back from my near death experience and I could feel the plant's emotions and stuff like that, I was just like, oh, I get why great grandma talked to the plants. And they've actually done studies with plants that if you talk nice to one plant, it will grow and be luscious and beautiful. If you talk mean and say bad thoughts to another plant, it will wilt and be sad. And they did that research study to show how to talk to children. Like it actually makes a difference. But this year was the first year I've ever had a place to try to garden before, and it went very, very, very well. I could tell I just instinctively knew what they needed and when they're happy and when they're sad. Of course, you can also see when they're not, when they're happy and they're sad. But my first ever try gardening, having no idea how to do it, it was very, very successful. And I still talk to my plants. I've got an indoor garden, and I talk to my mom's plants if she forgets about them and say, oh, it's okay. And she's be like, who are you talking to? My plants. But, we've seen it in research studies. I've seen it firsthand, and it's just our animals can't talk to us either, but we know that, they have feelings and they react the same. Although, then again, they've got blood running through their systems. But what is life? That's a big question. We think we have such a great idea. Life is when this happens and this happens, and this is the production of it. But I've come to learn that death isn't the opposite of life. It's just a change of it.
I know my mentor, Fran Ginsberg, who sadly passed over quarantine, over COVID, but not from COVID, from pancreatic cancer, used to always say, we use the word afterlife because it's what people relate to, but it's really just consistency of life in different states, some more material, some non-material, probably dimensions we don't even know. And, we experience being many different humans, as the research of Dr. Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson shows all the way to. So, the word afterlife is misleading, but it's
so is
what
death.
We culturally relate to. Oh, I love that. Makes me so happy. I mean, yeah, no one knows that more than someone who's been there. So I'm going to ask you just, okay, well, first of all, and then I want to go back and talk more about the code and all of that. I just, as someone who's sciencey and math, like I just am obsessed when you first told me this at the conference. Why do you think this is real and not a hallucination of your mind? Like sensory wise, did it feel different than a dream?
Yes.
So describe how it feels and why you think it was real and not a hallucination.
So I also struggled with this for a while. Like, a lot of reasons people and near deathers don't talk about these experiences or out of body or spiritually transformative experiences, because people are going to be like, oh, you're crazy, or it was a dream, or it was a hallucination. So it took me a little while, like, well, am I crazy? Was it a crazy dream? Was it a hallucination? I was really tired. I don't know. But so my biggest things are, do you remember your dream from 6.5 years ago perfectly with all the details? Do you remember your dream from 2 nights ago? Yeah, me neither.
Only if I write them down. And the only dreams I remember vividly from years ago, even childhood ones, there's probably about 4, and they all have oddly tied into this stuff as I've studied it. And I'm not going to waste your time talking about them, but I'll start adding them in like parts of an episode just to explain this. So
maybe they're not just dreams. Ooh.
It's weird. One is in my book when I dreamt and had all these crazy physical sensations, which I don't have during dreams, of like waves going through me, and this explanation of mediumship combined with string theory. Yeah, all that's in my first book, and this was very early on. I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
I love it.
So,
So
so
I've also had hallucinations, especially with some medications I've reacted to that the doctors tried. And the hallucinations were very, very different as well, which I don't remember at all. I just remember having the hallucination, but I don't remember what happened within the hallucination. And then dreams, I can't remember. I can't recall. I can't even recall what I did 2 days ago. Like the fact I have crystal clear memory without writing this down, of every single event and the feeling of it. Also, I didn't feel dead. I felt free and alive, and the feelings. I mean, it was just so. I don't have those in dreams or hallucinations, and I definitely felt more alive and more free than here for sure.
did
I
you
think.
have? Oh, sorry. Go on. You weren't done.
I wrote notes for that particular question, so I was just looking real quick. Also, the big thing is, what dreams heal you?
They don't. They don't. I mean, from my personal experience, which is about probably like 1% of what you've experienced, when I think of sort of the fever, sort of hallucination-y dreams I've had when I've had like bad flus or strep throat, they feel very different. I'm obviously healing because sleep heals and medicine heals. And even like a few post-surgery dreams I've had, they're very foggy. And when I think of that dream I just shared about the waves and vibrations going through me, but I didn't even know waves and vibrations were a thing in this world, again, early studying and
Mm-hmm.
a combination of mediumship combined consciousness of mediumship combined with string theory. I mean, I relate to everything you've said. I'm probably like a level 1 where you were probably like, I can't even say level 10, probably a level 1,000 or something of experience. And you felt physical sensations, because I think that's a fear some of us, myself included, have is this just, even if there is a continuation of consciousness, is it as experiential? Because my dreams I like my dreams. I think they're real while they're happening.
Yeah.
Most of my dreams, I can't say all, I've definitely had some nightmares, and the ones I remember clearly, it's only because I wrote them down right when I woke up, and I'll go back and read them. But they're not as present. They're not as full, not even close to it as my life here. Do you feel it was as full and robust as being a person?
Oh, even more so. I mean, I had like 4 different bodies, so it was just like the options were endless.
4 different bodies? What do you mean?
When I was in the void and the tunnel, I had no body. I was just energy. But while I was with these other beings, I was a robot and a doll and a snowman. And the white room, I was kind of a semblance of my physical body here when I grabbed the numbers. So I had 4 different bodies, so I could just whatever. I mean, nothing was off limits. It seems. Your thoughts became an instantaneous thing, and I got to experience things with other beings, other consciousnesses. We were in a store together and like stocking shelves, which doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind, but neither does the whole experience. And then we ended up dancing together, and just there are other beings working together. So it's like, yeah, there were some human-like experiences over there, but then you multiply it by all the other crazy experiences. And I got to try to fly, and I slid down trees. I'm not going to be able to slide down trees or, fly without a plane or, vehicle here. So
If I slid down a tree, what the hell? Sorry, my phone just did something weird. I'm going to say I'm having weird electronic stuff talking to you, and the only other time that has happened is like talking to NDE people. It's very strange. Can you still hear me? Because my phone kept, okay, it kept trying to open Alexa, and I don't even have Alexa. I don't know. It keeps saying that with my headphones. I'm just going to say, I have never had this happen except talking to another NDE person and experiencer, but apparently people who've experienced NDEs influence electronics. Have you? I wasn't even going to ask that, except suddenly my headphones keep saying, open the Alexa app and try again. I'm going to have to reset them. This apparently, I was warned this could happen talking to NDE people. And now it is like my Zencaster didn't work. We had to move to Zoom. And like I was having, this is really strange. I never have electronic problems. I have had them talking to people who've experienced NDEs. So tell me, have you, do you have weird experiences with electronics?
So
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to reset my headphones. Give me 1 second. And they've never done this in my life this much. They might do it once. They just keep saying, open the Alexa app and try again. So that is apparently something I was warned I would have to deal with doing Zooms and Zencaster and video interviews with people who've had NDEs. And I was like, yeah, right. And now it's happened. Things that are absolutely inexplicable.
Yeah. So I've blown out, my most common things have been street lights or lights in general. Like I blow out light bulbs constantly, watches, and heating blankets, which is really unfortunate because I love heating blankets and they don't last long for me. I have to buy them like twice a season.
It's interesting. I know Dr. Janice Holden, who I've had on this, and she's attended IANDS conferences as well. She always said she could tell who the experiencers of NDEs were because they don't wear watches. So she's been doing this a while. I think in our generation, we're both millennial, correct? I don't know how old you are. Okay. You look young, which is actually something.
32. I'm like doing all the math and stuff.
Yeah. And I've also noticed NDEers, and I've noticed this with mediums, tend to look younger. I think it's an energy thing. But Dr. Holden used to always say she would notice the people who'd had NDEs at the conferences because she could recognize them that they didn't wear a watch. Now, I don't think anyone in our generation or below tends to wear watches unless decoratively. I wear a few as bracelets that don't even work because, we use our phones. But that's just very interesting. And, as you said, like some have to get new phones you didn't say this part, but some people have to get new phones all the time, constantly updating their electronics. Wow, light bulbs, it's fascinating.
Yeah, light bulbs is definitely mine. And we were actually kind of concerned if I would blow out my battery in my chest.
After your NDE?
Yeah, after my NDE, because all the stuff I blow out. So,
did you ever?
No, well, I've had it for less than 2 years, and no, in that time, I never blew it out. But I don't know if I turned it back on. I don't know, especially with all my meditations and being able to get back into that space, that near-death experience space. It's I don't know. It could be blown out. I don't know because I haven't turned it back on.
Hey everyone. I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. The code. Did you ever have a chance to look up the Global Consciousness Project?
I did. I know they measure different things throughout the world, and the coherence stuff.
And their random number generators all use zeros and ones, and people seem to affect that. Since you saw zeros and ones, okay, I'm interrupting a second to tell you a little bit about the Global Consciousness Project. I have talked about it a lot on this podcast and in my book, but for new listeners or to refresh your memory, this is a project run by Dr. Roger Nelson, where random number generators were placed around the world, and they generate ones and zeros. Being random, they should be like a coin toss and generate essentially 50% ones and 50% zeros. Overall, they do. But when world events happen and our consciousness is focused in abnormal ways, such as 9/11, they begin to behave non-randomly, producing more ones than zeros or more zeros than ones. What is super batshit too is that they even begin to show this data and change in randomness a few hours before the 9/11 attacks, and same as with some other world events. So I don't even know what to think, but Brianna seeing ones and zeros made me think of this project and how this kind of code ties into our consciousness. And now back to our talk. They all use zeros and ones. So how does your NDE tie into that?
Yeah, so I mean, this one is purely speculatory. I have no idea. It's based off of nothing except for my experience. That it's a form of binary code. I believe just more in depth, and binary code might be too simplistic of terms for the creation of the universe. But it relates to we use binary code for programs and computers and stuff. And there's also theories that we are also in a program. So, kind of makes sense that, I saw the overall code and, it's just one more level. And what we're experiencing here is a level of that code. And then we interpret that and we put a lower level of code into computer programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you think about it that way. If code is make up the universe the same way matter, if you just look at biology, what stars are made of, what planets, galaxies away are made of, there's all the same DNA, actual biological code.
And all the stuff that uses the Fibonacci sequence in, creation, like different plants and animals and even shells on different crustaceans. And it's just like crazy how many things use the Fibonacci sequence. And so it makes sense to me that everything here is just code.
And you think that's made of like zeros and ones, or do you think that's a binary definition? I
think that's a binary definition. In my tunnel, I saw ones and zeros, but in that further room after the tunnel where I picked up all the numbers and realized, no wonder you love creating things because it's all math. There was more numbers than ones and zeros. So, I'm not quite sure, but I know that it's got to be something important and significant. And then for it to come in and help rewire my brain to function here in this realm, it's just mind blowing. I would love to figure out more about this code I saw and experienced and was downloaded with, and the numbers I, experienced in that room, and, just how it relates to this life, how it relates to the life beyond this one, and just how it trickled. I'm just fascinated with how I saw the code, and then we're here and you can see code in just tons of things. Like I just mentioned, plants and animals. But then we take code and we create computers and softwares and programs. And it's like, how far does that go? And how far does it go up? It's just, I wish my human brain can comprehend and understand all.
Yeah. What do you think about time?
Yeah, human construct. Just like politics, religion, culture, time, calendars, they're all human constructs. There was no such thing as time where I was at. And it also has given me different meanings to some different religious scripture that, has times in there. But time is a human construct. So did it really take that amount of time? Oh, and it drives me nuts with carbon dating. I'm like, how do you know that it was 3 billion years old if you've only lived for this amount of time? And how do you know carbon dating is accurate if you can't see beyond, the scope of your own life? So I just have a really hard time with anything time.
Now, when you say human construct, do you mean like we just make it up as humans, or is it actually encoded into the human experience? Because it does seem encoded into the human experience. No one lives beyond X number of years. Your body changes at certain ways at certain points. I mean, literally 1 year to 5 years. It seems pretty consistent across the board of how a human body, animal body changes.
So it could be encoded with us. I think a lot of things are encoded in the human experience. But the human experience is what builds the construct, not necessarily the code. And, there have been, studies of people who have supposedly lived much longer than, what we're supposed to live. And, people who don't age on the same timeline. And, it's just, I'm very apprehensive when anything comes to time.
So, I mean, do you think we could manipulate it in a sense if like a group of humans just like, let's just say we changed the definition of aging. I think most of us would like that and would, like to look younger, longer, and like to have ourselves and our loved ones here longer. Although, again, that seems to be an illusion because it seems really nice afterwards. But I think most of us would love it if, we could stay in a young body into elderly age and guarantee that our loved ones are here, say 200 years. If we said, I don't know, like age doesn't exist, and I'll just do a simple one rather than getting elderly, but let's say we said it and we're like, pick the age you want, and all of society agreed on that. Could like a 5-year-old look 12, a 20-year-old look 5, with the things that happen to our bodies overall within a spectrum at certain ages? Could that somehow be manipulated in some way?
I totally believe it could happen. But getting enough people on that frame of mind and doing the work it would take to do that, because it's not just like, oh, I believe that I look 12. There's a lot of work on the spiritual end that needs to go into that. So I do believe it is a possibility. I don't think it's a probability. But also the whole, changing time and warping time and traveling in time, I believe is very, very possible. And there's an interesting theory. Have you heard of the Q?
No.
You should look it up.
Explain it. I mean, I've heard of like QAnon, and which I do not stand by, and that crazy shit. So, like, tell me what you mean by the Q.
So,
I'm interrupting for a second to say, on a really good note, Brianna is definitely not talking about QAnon. She double-checked, made sure, and let me know.
My mom follows these people who predict the future, basically, to the date and the time and the event. And it happens on the day, at the time they predict, in the exact event. That how in the world do they know anything about? There's also, tons of people who are remote viewers and, and then mediums and psychics. Meditation, people who are very, very good and disciplined in meditation can also travel through, what we call time.
First of all, what is this group, the Q? Just to clarify, it is not tied in with QAnon, correct?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I will email you when I get more clarification.
Okay.
My mom's just always talking about them. And like, oh my gosh, they just predicted this and it came true. They predicted this 5 years ago. So I will send you an email with more clarification. And you can look them up.
Because I do not stand by QAnon anyway, shape, or form here.
What is QAnon? I've heard it.
They're sort of this like crazy, super like kind of pro-Trump, anti-medicine, kind of slightly like anti-woman.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, you're better off not knowing, but they've caused kind of
I stay away from a lot of any sorts of media. How do you know? I don't know. That's a whole other topic.
I think a lot of NDEers say that, and there seems to be some way, tell me if I'm wrong about this. We don't have to go much further with this because this, is another thing, but it almost like you almost see like above it, like it's a slight human game, the way 2-year-olds would fight over certain things. Is 100%. That kind of what it's like?
Yeah. Like, what is the point? And it is so trivial. And if you just, especially other NDEers, we felt complete unity and oneness and love and for everyone without judgment or, so it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It's just it's like you said, you put it very, very well, a stupid game that 2-year-olds play.
The only thing where I get confused about this, because NDEers overall, and I always add overall to everything, tend to be more loving and living love and generosity that, is a level I don't think I'm at yet. I try to be very generous and loving, but I think NDEers tend to be at a perspective that I don't think most of us, even very good people, are at. But my question is things like politics, unfortunately, do tie into taking away human rights and animal rights in very real ways. So so in my level of never having an NDE, I would think NDEers would be very into fighting for, human rights. I mean, things have happened like the overturning of Roe, like people taking away like, access to food from people who need it, wars of killing people. So I would almost think NDEers would be like diehard involved in politics. So just explain that to me.
I've got a great, great idea of why. So I'm not. So I don't think I've voted since my NDE, because I think a lot of us can see that both sides, it's two wings of the same bird, and heck, even 100 years ago, the parties had completely opposite views. So Democrats believed what Republicans do now and vice versa. And it's just, I think we see a hopelessness to it. So we would rather spend our time with things that actually make a difference, other than this thing that we're told we get a choice on, we get a vote on, but that's not how I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that's how the world's run. I don't think I don't think our vote matters, first off. And second, most of these politicians have, just the same kind of, they say different things, but I don't know. It's hard. You would think, you're right. You would think that we'd be so passionate about saving the world, but we just go about it at a very different way.
I could see that. And just tell me if I'm right or wrong with this, and we'll move on from this. It's almost like you're kind of not part of the material world in a way. The only way I can explain that, to me, this seems like really big deals. And I think it is. I think that's why we come here to be human. But I would almost see it like some NDEers are like, oh, I understand. Things that is incomprehensible to me as a human. Like they'll say, we understand. And I want to be very, very sensitive in saying this, but understand why someone might do vile things such as mass murder. And people who've had NDEs and people have learned on the other side a very different perspective of things that I will say, in my perspective, I say are evil. And I am in no way saying you approve of something like mass murder, but you have an understanding of it from such a higher perspective. And it seems like, consciousness that are, maybe haven't been human for thousands of years or hundreds of years. I don't know enough to say how long consciousness that once were human have not returned or what, like that's another, but they have an understanding of things like someone who commits genocide. I mean, horrible, horrible, horrible. And again, I really don't want it to come off that I say you think it's okay for someone to be a murderer, but there's a type of, am I saying this right? Like a loving understanding that we can
I think
to understand being someone like me who's only in this life as Liz has only had a human experience, whereas you've had another dimensional experience. Is that right? And I hope I don't.
I think you said it very very eloquently. We do have a very, very different perspective. So instead of, coming at it where, these mass murders and genocides and, just even small things, such as domestic violence and assault and, stuff like that. We definitely, you're right. We do not condemn it. It did not sound like you did, like we approve it. But we do have a different view on what that person is going through, why they chose this life, and why the victims chose, that, and, that part of their human experience as well. So we do see it very, very differently. Well, and when you have a bird's eye view of all like this game, instead of just being really close to that piece and not being able to see what else is on the board, we do have this big bird's eye view, and we can kind of see all the pieces, if that makes sense.
It does. Everyone listen with caution, because I don't know who's been through what and who has lost someone in what ways, or has experienced what type of traumas in their life, or what rights might have impacted you that have been taken away politically, or, so I want to be really sensitive that we're getting into philosophical and, take everything with, I just want to be very mindful, because we don't know what individuals listening have or have not experienced. And I would think there'd be a percentage of tipping point. If 95% of people had this level of what you're saying, it would be probably wonderful for the world. But at the same time, why be a human? The whole human experience would be destroyed. And then maybe if there was a percent, I don't know what percent of people have had perspective of NDE, but it's a tiny percent. But there's probably a tipping point where like 30% or something of people, it would be terrible because they wouldn't be involved enough. I do think there's something about, we're here to be involved in politics as humans. We're here to be a human trying to improve things in the human experience. And if enough people were sort of not fully in it, it would be detrimental. If there's also a tipping point where if so many were above this, we'd have such a loving, blissful earth, which to me, I'm like, ooh, let's get there. But maybe our whole reason for being here would be irrelevant. Does this make sense?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. I do believe that if, a majority of people had these experiences and understood what real love is, and had this bird's eye view, a ton of constructs would come crashing down, and we would have this beautiful, beautiful world. But then you're right, like, we came here to be human, to experience the human things. And that, that includes the bad stuff that we experience. I don't know if you saw Betty Guadagno at IANDS.
Yes.
She got to see her pre-birth plan, and it moves me to tears every time she tells it. Just like all the awful stuff she put in her cart, like all the awful things she wanted to experience as a human, because over there, you don't experience loss and grief and fear and anger and sorrow and all these things that we consider negative emotions. So of course you want to experience it. You load it up. You don't think it's going to be that bad. It's like, oh, that's a fun experience. Oh, that'll be fun. And then we get here, it's like, oh shit.
This is horrible. Why did I do
this? Why did I choose all this? What kind of badass did I think I was? Why did I think this would be fun?
I kind of want to kick my pre-birth person's ass for some of the choices. I'm like, wait, no, was I a stupid enough fuck that I picked this and this? Like, oh my God. But what do you think the point of that is? Because, I've dealt with some trauma, and there's people who've dealt with less trauma than I have. And there are people who've dealt with so much more. I think when I look at people in war-torn places or people in poverty, that's something I have never, ever experienced. And what would be the point of that from a perspective of someone who's had an NDE. And again, I just want to state, I'm not saying we condone this or not, because again, we don't know people's personal experiences, but
I've also had quite an extensive list of traumas on top of the crazy rare illness, in my life. Okay. And so that was another reason. So yeah, I've had, I don't know the number, but sexual assaults from different people from the time I was 3 to 23.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
And it's part of the experience, and I chose it for some reason. But that included family members, that included coworkers, that included gang assault. So just a very interesting variety of sexual and physical assaults since I was a young child, and dealing with that on top of the illness and other stuff was very, very, very difficult. And another reason I would not have chosen to come back, but what if it happens more? But I know that I had to walk through hell to see the heaven. Like I had to walk through hell to bring heaven on earth. And because of my experiences, I have a heart full of compassion, of understanding, and then having this near-death experience on top of that. It's like I see also kind of what happened that had my attackers do the things they did. What
would that be? I know, and again, don't have to listen to this. I know if people are wondering why, is sometimes maybe I know I've had people reach out, have lost people to murder, and so again, that's why I'm being quadruple sensitive, right? I mean, we should always be sensitive, but I just want to say, so you do, if you need to pause this, please go ahead. But may I ask, what was their reasoning? Because I know I always ask. I have not dealt with what you have. I don't want to pretend I have, but I've dealt with, along with the loss of my father, just seeing a lot of cruelty in my life.
And while I was going through the struggles with my illness, they say, well, I've got this pain, but it's nowhere like yours. But then I say, if you have only ever had a paper cut, that was the most painful experience of your whole life. That is going to be on the same level of where I'm at, with my pain, because it's the most painful thing I've ever experienced. That doesn't make your pain any less, because that is still the most painful to you. It is an individual experience, and that's why we're here. So I haven't lost a parent yet, thankfully. My mom is, my guardian angel on so many occasions, and but these other situations, I believe that we decide what, certain awful things that happen to us, or we see that we're affected by, and it's to grow our spiritual selves, and whether that's, to just grow as a soul. There's some NDEers who say that other beings over there who've never had the experience want to learn from our experiences. So we come here as a vessel for learning for them, and that includes the horrific things. And then also just being here and going through such hard times, if we make it out of it during our human lifetime, the impact we can have on other people, the impact I know that NDEers have on you and your ever changing beliefs on what exists beyond. It's so exciting. And, other people in chronic pain are coming to me, how do I change this? What can I do? People who have seen these paranormal experiences that haven't told anyone ever because they're crazy or taboo or not in their religion or against their religion. They're like, you're not alone. I'm like, I know I'm not. Do you know you're not? So I think it's so many different levels that these awful things happen. And we, as the people who experience the awful things and those who commit the awful things, it's unfortunately part of our pre-birth plan. And I think sometimes souls come together even before that birth and contract together. That is just my theory based on other NDE accounts and, my experiences. I don't, obviously there's no way to prove that to be true or not. It's just kind of my take on why bad things happen and why bad things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to bad people. It's just
And
the human experience.
you saw where your attackers were coming from. And I think, as I would say, almost every human who, doesn't like to hurt people often wonder, like, why? Where could someone be coming from who intentionally takes it upon themselves to hurt a person who did nothing to them to such a vile degree? Like, why? Where could they possibly be coming from?
A world of hurt. That's usually where they're coming from. You don't have a person. I mean, other than mental illness, that's a whole nother topic. But you usually see, and I'm going to say I don't know the exact percentage, but a large majority, if not all of them, come from some form of hurt being imposed into them, sometimes at a young age, sometimes later in life. And the only way they know how to regain control, sometimes they don't know how to love. Sometimes they think it's a form of love, especially in forms of generational physical abuse households. The dad was abused and abused his son because he thought discipline was a way to get love, and that abuse was his way to get respect, was his way of love. It's a misinterpretation of love, but usually it comes from being hurt themselves, and that hurt is generational and it passes on. It passes on through our ancestors. It passes on through our physical genes. It changes our genealogy. That's why I think we see more sickness and illnesses nowadays, because all these generational, you could call them curses or whatever, keep transferring down. And if we don't clear that hurt and we don't clear that impact, then we just keep imposing it on.
So I just had one theory about what Earth could be about, is that there's a combination of levels of sort of loving people. And Earth is almost like a filter. And there's probably other planets like this too, where there's probably dark energies in the universe and cruel energies and hurt and empty and sad, lonely, all the negative energies in the universe. And Earth is almost a filter that tries to, and that succeeds, I should say, in like taking those energies and bringing them and filtering them into a more loving energies and reducing the levels and of dark energies in the universe. And as they go through Earth, coming in dark, they filter out, going into us as humans or animals, and going in and being filtered out more loving. And it's a slow process. And I had that. This is, again, philosophical. I don't expect you to have like the scientific, yes, this is fact, but
this is fact. Didn't you see the big filter?
Yes. But in the sense that, like, there's I'd say the majority of people, myself included, you see someone horrible, like someone, as you were talking about, like horrible, vile abuse, and I just want to hurt them. I'm like, you are a horrible person. I hate you. I want you in jail. I just want to bring suffering to you. Now, in reality, I also can intellectually step beyond that, although I am not advanced enough to apply this, where if you took someone who was starting to commit horrible, vile acts, and I've actually watched moving prison documentaries of this, where they start to realize they were abused as children and they begin to heal. And ideally, you take a 5-year-old in a much more loving world than we've advanced to, who's behaving horribly. Most of our society punishes them. Reality, they probably need a hug and to be told they're really, really loved. And if we did that, crime and abuse would reduce so much. So it's almost like there's people who are more loving than others in terms of how they live their lives. And if we were to take the people we find most offensive, or even animals, the biting, scratching, animals that seem vicious, and you start giving them love, they transform. So it's almost some filter that if we just completely gave love to the worst of humanity, we would be filtering them because they change and they become loving and they heal. It's almost like the dark energy goes through them. The loving comes around them and heals them. As they pass away, they're a loving energy that goes maybe into the loving dimension. Is that at all something that could resonate, or is
Oh,
that so out of my
absolutely.
ass?
No, absolutely. So I also, coming from having this experience and where I was, there was no hate and anger and, awfulness. So, I here on earth, I think that's why we come to earth, because there are these polar opposites. There is this thing that is evil and dark and, menacing and hateful. And then we bring the love with us, but we also forget, when we come here, we forget about that. Um, so, here, yeah, that darkness, that evil can come through you. And if you never find that love to heal, it's just going to keep going, and it's going to find others, and it's going to spread. But the love can do the same thing. What you're talking about reminds me of, have you heard of the organization Give to Give? So they take Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings and meditations and love. They took it to the most dangerous women's prison in Mexico. It was so dangerous that women would not hardly sleep. And if they slept, it would be standing up against a wall. There was so much violence, so much murder, so much anger, and they brought this love into this prison. And by the end of it, they were all friends, and they were so loving towards each other. And so, absolutely, I think we can change the world through love. But we still have this polar. There's so much hate and hurt and darkness. We have to just smother it with love. So that is my life's goal. I have a heal the world complex. I know it probably won't happen, but you bet your butt I'm going to try.
It heals my grief every time I hear a tangible experience of an NDE.
So Mary Neal, the NDEer who had a kayaking accident, I just saw the movie After Death. It came out Friday and I saw it Saturday. She said this about grief, and it was so beautiful. This NDE experience and our vast knowledge does not make us immune to grief, because she lost her son. She even knew she was going to lose her son. And she gets so torn up about it, because these expanded knowledge does not make us immune from grief either.
I remember early on in my research, along with just constantly needing to raise the bar, getting more evidence, which I still am doing, I thought there was going to be a tipping point where I would get such a level of evidence, grief would no longer be something I would ever have to feel, no matter who I lost down the line. And it seems like I am 95 convinced there's an afterlife, and grief impacts me just as hard. So
yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an optimistic view on that one. I think the grief is another human experience that we came here to experience. And no matter how vast your knowledge is, and I am 100,020 bajillion% sure of an afterlife. But if I was to lose any of my immediate family members, I will be a mess forever, here on earth, until I get to go see them again. Our vast knowledge does not make us immune from grief, but the knowledge might help us be able to process it a little better.
The grief didn't hurt less, but a layer of hope and happiness is added to this absolutely knock you to the floor, unable to function. There aren't even words, grief. But it wasn't only the grief. There's another, an icing on top of just some horrible, brutal thing, But still, hearing that you're that positive in afterlife, what did you think there was an afterlife before your experience?
I was pretty sure there was. What that looked like, I had no idea. I grew up Christian, but had kind of fallen, away from the faith just with all the shit that happened, the constant abuse from different people, and the church not being helpful at all, and my illness, and literally begging God to take away my illness. And I wasn't really sure. Well, and even when I called out for help, I didn't know who I was calling out to, because I didn't know, who was really, if there was even anyone there. So I had a feeling that our consciousness didn't just stop. but I had no idea what that looked like.
What are your thoughts on religion? Do you
Mm.
identify with religion in any way still, or think there's a God or anything?
So this fires a lot of people up. They really don't like that I say this. I think all the religions are right and they are all wrong. Each one has bits and pieces that are correct, and all of them have many things that are wrong. Religions are once again created by human construct, trying to, probably put into words what this, and it gave us hope, So I don't think there's anything wrong with having religion. It's not the full story. And after my near death experience, I went on the hunt. I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, different Christianities, Taoism, a bunch of different, the list goes on because I was like, who's right? Like, what did I just experience and who has it right? And I didn't find that anywhere. But there are some very amazing things within religious scriptures. I'm saying that of all the religious scriptures, there's beautiful ways to live. And most all of them talk about try to teach you how to love and how to, like you said, like using your filter example, how to filter out all the evil and just fill with love, and how to treat people right. And and a lot of other religions, you can't eat pork because it's against, God says not to, but God said not to because it's a dirty animal and you could get really sick from eating bad pork. Or just in Christian, I don't know if it's in any other religions, but having sex before you're married, it's not necessarily because you're going to go to hell for it. It's trying to protect your heart, and your body. Yeah, there's illnesses that can happen and your heart can be broken. So all these things just try to teach you to live a better life. But do they say what happens correctly after we're gone? No. And is there some human construct and people who have gone power hungry and manipulated the text? Absolutely.
An interesting thing that I first saw, I was like, oh, that makes sense about no sex before marriage. I mean, I am totally for sex before marriage. Like, that being said, the first time I was like, oh, this makes sense. I was looking at, I was in Bath in England looking at one of the graveyards with a friend and her father. And he was like, look how many young women in their late teens, early 20s passed. And it was at the writers, the Bronte sisters' home. And women that age were getting married in their mid-teens. They died in childbirth. And I was like, oh, so this was before birth control, before medically safe abortion, before all this stuff we take for granted today. And I mean, that's only improving in our lifetime. I mean, I think our grandkids will take for granted egg freezing and, gender selection and all this stuff that my friends and I have access to today. And that hopefully not just, privileged. Obviously, there's been a lot of legal changes, which, is a whole other thing. But, hopefully that won't be an elite thing to have that level of access to your, sexual health. But so back then, there were STDs, HIV, I guess, had not hit the world, but there were STDs
Yeah, but
that
there's
were
others.
curable. Yeah, in the 1800s. So it makes a lot of sense if childbirth was, and I'm not saying nobody dies anymore in childbirth. It certainly is a bit of a risk, but it's nothing like the risk in the 1800s. I think that would make really good sense. Hey, you have this level of risk of dying. Don't have sex before marriage. That is the best way you could keep yourself safe, because also people didn't just live together. So yeah, I mean, that was just something that really hit me. Whereas now it's like, hey, don't have sex in your teens without a condom or without an IUD, like, get tested for STDs and be a little safe, and so
that wasn't an option. So
that wasn't an option.
There's beautiful things that are, scriptures just try to have you a healthy, happy person, and pass that on. Where but things change, like you said, and now pork is not as dangerous anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you don't cook it right. But
right. Factory farming is cruel. Like I eat meat, but like I don't know. I'm just plugging my own thing. Like the factory farming just breaks my heart. Go to like ethical farms if you can,
So moving over here to the western slope in Colorado in a tiny town, we get farm fresh eggs. Like we know farmers everywhere for our eggs and our cattle. And I've never really liked pork, so it's also never been a thing for me. Everyone like gets so excited about bacon, and I just have never understood it.
I love pigs. They're so cute. I mean, cows too, but we also have to be realistic that we eat.
Yeah.
So I just try to find if anyone can do this like ethical farming where animals get to, have a decent life for a period of time. And, if you can, I know that's a privilege because it is more expensive. So,
like if you live in the middle of a giant city, I don't know how feasible that is either.
I live in New York and LA, and both of them you find it everywhere if you go to like co-ops and farmers markets. And oh, it sounds so nice where you are though too. Getting to be around farm country like that must be just beautiful, delicious food. And
yes, and like I said earlier, I did a garden for the first time, so growing my own produce really is awesome. It's so rewarding.
I've heard people say, oh, on the other side, we're all one and we all merge with the oneness. Now, I think people say that thinking that sounds good. I think that sounds horrible. Like my dad was my dad. I don't want him to be like merged into this murky oneness. I don't want to merge into this murky oneness. To what extent do you think we stay individuals on the other side?
100%. So we do become one, as in this kind of acting as one, I would say, but I was 100% myself. I didn't meld. Some people are worried that we meld, just merge back into source and kind of disappear, but I was just, my consciousness expanded. So all my thoughts and my silly feelings and stuff, I didn't really remember Earth, but I remembered I didn't like snow, because cold would set off melanocystonia. So why I remembered that when I didn't remember Earth was kind of silly. Still, I had the experiences as myself. My thought, it's just like if I got to go experience something new, like outside right now, like when I jumped out of an airplane, like that was a really cool, fun experience. It was just really exciting, and I loved it very much. And then over there, it's like, oh, I'm sliding down trees. Oh, this is so exciting. I still have, the same excitement and emotions, and it felt just like me. The unity and oneness comes in as like when I melted, because I got too close to a fire thing as a snowman. And I wondered, I just had the thought, I wonder if they'll put me back together. And instantly they put me back together. So that's what I would consider oneness and unity. And then the dancing and the, doing stuff in the store, we were all moving together as if we'd choreographed forever, but I was still me. It was just, we moved in oneness. We communicated in oneness, if that makes sense.
Do you think those were the ones you were dancing with? Were they other, like your soul group or friends or anyone you knew? Or
I don't think I knew any of them. Like I said, I don't even know if they were human before. I don't think it was a soul group, because it seemed like we had all kind of landed in this area, and it was kind of this in between. And some of them moved on, and some of them, like me, didn't. I think it was just kind of this holding area. That sounds bad, but just this place that it was a transitional area we got to hang out in.
And you didn't remember Earth. Did you remember your family or loved ones?
I didn't. I personally didn't. A lot of people do, but I did not.
And maybe you just didn't in that moment.
Yeah. And, people make it to these amazing places, that they consider heaven or heaven-like, and they see their loved ones that have passed on, and their friends and their animals come to get them. I was in such a middle place. Like I wasn't in this super amazing, beautiful place. I was just in this kind of holding playground.
Now, lastly, do you have anything to say to grieving people or maybe terminal people who just are like skeptical and think an afterlife is close to impossible? What would you say to them?
I really don't try to change anyone's opinion. I know they'll be in for a fun awakening when they get there. But I feel like it's a journey within yourself to, whatever you believe, and all the things that got you to believe and then to change your mind. So I'd say, if that's what you believe, that's none of my business. But for people who are grieving, I can talk on my own experience, and now being part of IANDS, and experiencing the afterlife, and other people who have experienced the afterlife. I 100% believe in it. And there's also, like you said, mediums and people who can talk with, their deceased loved ones. And Serena Baptista, after she lost her son, I think he was 10 years old, he died of the flu. And he came back. He said he showed up and he was making all sorts of ruckus, and until she paid attention and figured out how to talk to him. So if you're really, really struggling and you want to figure out how to talk to somebody, I'd say go for it. However, I'm not sure all people want to, come back and talk through the veil. So that's just a caution I throw out there. I'm talking to a friend right now that she just lost a friend, and she's like, how do I stay connected? I'm like, okay, first off, just passed. He might not want to visit right now. Maybe he's having so much fun. Like I was having so much fun. I don't know if I would come back and talk to people. But grief is, it's a process, and just finding a way to honor your memories of them, I think, is probably the best, whether you believe in an afterlife or not. Hold on to the good memories of your human experience. And then you may or may not get to hang out with them later.
However much data you read or research, nothing's like talking to someone who's actually been there. These people know stuff that you or I can't really dream of while we're in this life. So I really appreciate your generosity and your openness and sharing your story. And I hope it's really given people who've been through all sorts of difficulties some hope and vitality back to your life and heart and everything.
I hope so too. Thanks for having me. It was awesome meeting you at IANDS. Awesome talking to you some more today.
Where can our listeners find you? Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so you can find all things me on my website, which is Brionic LLC. That's BRIONICLLC.com. Of course, I had to throw a 0 in there because of the code. And there you can find my book, White Flame. It's about my near-death experience and the paranormal metaphysical stuff that led up to it. My other book is Wired to be Dysfunctional. It was co-authored with my mom, all about the myoclonus dystonia journey, what that looked like, in the search for getting a diagnosis, all the misdiagnoses, her being an amazing advocate, and me finally getting brain surgery. And then my third book I'm going to try to work on this Thanksgiving will be, I didn't know how they were related, the near-death experience and the chronic illness, until that meditation retreat. So I will be writing how they are connected and how you too might be able to work on healing through, not just illness, but grief and the spiritual craziness we have to deal with in the human experience. So that'll be coming out too.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey-Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?